Harry was the media's darling. He was the war hero. He'd served in Afghanistan. He was a cheeky chappy. I mean, you speak to royal correspondents who've been doing the job for a long time, and they all loved Harry. I would challenge anyone who watched the latest video not to be moved. I mean, when I first watched it, I confess, Bronte, I cried.
Harry was extremely popular in Australia. People absolutely loved him. He'd been there on his own a few times and had an incredible turnout. And when he was there with Meghan, she was the one that was sort of grabbing the focus. People would be screaming on her side of the, when they'd split up, they'd all be screaming for Meghan.
That's very shades of Charles and Diana, isn't it?
Hi, I'm Bronte Coy, news.com.au's royal reporter. And as you may have noticed, I'm not your usual host. In a bit of an ironic swap, Matt is currently in Australia covering the King and Queen's royal tour, and I'll be here filling in while he's gone. So I'm very excited to tell you that with me in the studio is Ailsa Anderson, who is the Communications and Press Secretary to the late Queen Elizabeth II for 12 years. Ailsa, it is such a pleasure to have you here with me in studio. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Well, obviously the big news this week is that royal tour I've mentioned. But before we get into that, given your position as one of the most important people in the palace during your years there, yes, I'd love to do a bit of a quick royal PR health check on some of our households, okay?
Okay.
So to begin with, Prince William and Princess Catherine, they've obviously had such a tough year so far. How do you think they're looking public perception-wise?
I think they have put on a faultless performance this year, considering where we were in January to where we are now. I think they're doing remarkably well, I really do. And I would challenge anyone who watched the latest video that the princess put out after she'd finished her chemotherapy not to be moved. I mean, when I first watched it, I confess, Bronte, I cried. I was really moved. And I think because 1 in 2 of us, 50% of us, will be affected by cancer in one shape or form, I think what she's been doing and what she's been saying just makes her really relatable to people, because everyone can be touched by something like this.
Absolutely. And as part of your role when you were working within the household, you would have been there when Kate first joined the family and when she married into the family, so those really early years. Is this, what we're seeing now, is this the Kate that you knew, or is this a new Kate?
That's a really good question. Obviously, she's been a member of the royal family now for 12 years, and she has, there's not a manual to say how to become a princess. You learn by doing that role. So I think the role has evolved for her. She's a mother now, 3 children, young children, a wife, but also a queen in waiting. So I think she has really, really learnt while she's been undertaking these engagements in this royal world. And I would challenge anyone to say that she hasn't been doing a brilliant job, because she really has. And I think it's also very clear that she wants to put her health first as well. She wants to recover at her own pace rather than feeling pressurised to do more and more by other people. So I think good on her.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you speak of difficult years, of course, that also includes King Charles and Queen Camilla. So they're relatively new into their reign. How do you think they're doing PR-wise?
Again, I think they're doing superbly, and seeing the King undertaking 2 overseas visits, one in Germany, one in France, and speaking the language, being funny, being relatable, in quite difficult circumstances, I think is really, really joy-inspiring, really. And I think, he has the woman who he has loved, who he's loved for many, many years, at his side. And I think she's an incredible support to him while he can undertake his head of state duties. She's there, buoying him up, saying, "Well done, darling, you're doing an amazing job, and I'm here with you, helping you, watching your back going forward."
And again, are they... Is the Charles and Camilla that you're seeing on the world stage now, are they the people you knew back then?
Yes, I think they are. It was always going to be a huge loss to people when the late Queen Elizabeth died. And I heard rumours, certainly in the media, would the King, would Prince Charles step into that role properly? And yes, absolutely he has. He is being an amazing monarch. And for as long or as short a time as he will be, I think he's just fulfilling that role superbly, better than people probably expect, actually.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I simply must ask as well, our long-distance royals, Harry and Meghan, how are they doing?
Well, obviously, I had left Buckingham Palace, the royal household, by the time that the couple got married. So I only read what you read, Bronte, so you tell me.
Oh, I can tell you are so good at your job. No wonder the Queen kept you around. I was actually on Harry and Meghan's tour in 2018, and we've had royals visits since, but that was probably the last really big one that got a lot of attention. It was quite a long tour, and it tied in with Harry's Invictus Games, which was amazing. I got to go to some of those events.
Wow.
I know this was after your time, but watching on, I mean, this was like, you mentioned the Taylor Swift comparison. It was very similar because this was only a few months after they'd gotten married. The first day of the tour, Meghan announced she was pregnant, and this is when they were riding so high on that public popularity. Even just watching them come out at engagements, and you know they do that thing where when they're in a couple, they'll separate and go down each line. Yeah. Well, Harry was extremely popular in Australia. People absolutely loved him. He'd been there on his own a few times and had an incredible turnout. And when he was there with Meghan, she was the one that was sort of grabbing the focus. People would be screaming on her side of when they'd split up, they'd all be screaming for Meghan.
That's very shades of Charles and Diana, isn't it?
Well, yes, I was going to say, and it was, you know, I think by all accounts at the time it was considered a roaring success. You know, people loved them. They were this glamour couple. And again, I know this was after your time, but for myself, watching the difference, you know, to now and looking back at then, I guess I want to know from you, just who is Harry that you knew? Who is the Harry that you knew back then?
Yeah, so I obviously started in the palace in 2001, finished at the end of 2013. Harry was the media's darling. You know, he was the war hero. He'd served in Afghanistan. He was a cheeky chappy. I mean, you speak to royal correspondents who've been doing the job for a long time, and they all loved Harry. You know, absolutely loved him. Compared to William, in fact, you know, William was seen more of the sort of more serious, shyer, where Harry was, you know, the life and soul of the party. He couldn't do a thing wrong, and certainly when I spoke to him, you know, he was funny. He was intelligent. He was passionate about the military. You know, the Invictus Games is clearly, you know, testament to that. And in fact, I've got a photograph on my hall of Harry and I with our arms around each other. Don't read anything into this, please. Outside a ladies' loo. It's got ladies with a sort of an arrow on it, which is hilarious. But I mean, that was, you know, he was very happy to pose for, you know, with a member of staff for a photograph. So I can only speak from experience, Bronte, but he was that. And as I said, you know, he was the media's darling.
And speaking more generally now, since you left the royal household, every time a new royal PR crisis pops up, do you wonder how you would have handled it?
I just think, thank goodness I'm not there. Look at you guys.
I'll bet. In recent years,
I do think they're doing a brilliant job. I know quite a lot of the press officers there, and I think that it's a tough job. It really is. It's relentless. It's 24/7. You know, even when you're on holiday, you're still getting media calls, and I think they're doing a terrific job. I really do. So hats off to the royal household.
All right, well, let's get into the big news of the week. Obviously, the King and Queen are about to go on their most significant overseas tour since taking on the top job. You saw how the King operates as the Prince of Wales behind the scenes. How do you think his preparation looks a few days out from a tour like this?
Really good indeed. Obviously, a major tour like this has a lot of planning in place, and I did the late Queen's last tour to Australia in 2011, which was extraordinary, it really was. So there will be recce's, there'll be meticulous planning in a visit like this, especially his first one to Australia. He loves Australia, he absolutely adores it. He loves the Australian people. He will be really looking forward to it. But obviously, he has been ill. He has been undergoing treatment for cancer. He's pausing that, as we know, while he's overseas. He will be pacing himself. He will want to see and do as much as possible. You know, he's an incredible workaholic. He would want to, I think, you know, he'd want to work 12, 14, 16 hours a day, if at all possible. I think the Queen will be saying, actually, darling, hang on a minute, you know, please pace yourself, because it's, you know, it's a long distance. You want to fit in as much as possible, but you don't want to be making yourself ill while you're doing it. Yeah. So I think there'll be a lot of excitement in the lead up to the visit.
And they obviously have a very strong and solid team around them, you know, in preparing for something like this. From what you know of Charles, How hands-on is he in that actual day-to-day, sitting down, checking all the boxes, here's what we have to do, here's our focus?
Absolutely hands-on, totally. But as was the late Queen in terms of the planning and anything in a programme, people you meet, audience you give, the lunches, the dinners, the banquets, the speeches. The King will be all over that like a rash. He really will. You know, there will be no stone unturned. And he will want to put his stamp on it. You know, this is his first trip to Australia as monarch. He will want it to be a legacy piece, if you like. And I don't know how many trips he will make back to Australia. So it could be his only one. It could be one of many. You know, who knows? But he will want to make it a legacy piece.
And I know he's been doing the job for so long, as the late Queen did as well, but are there ever any nerves ahead of something like this?
Yes, absolutely. There are nerves because you don't want it to go wrong. You don't want to let people down. You know, he will be very conscious of giving a fantastic performance. You know, here he is on a world stage and he won't want to be putting a foot wrong. So yes, of course there's nerves, and quite right too. You know, if people didn't care about something, then they're not going to be nervous. So there will be nerves, but it's all in the preparation, Bronte, as you know, and there'll be, you know, people will be all over it, and everyone will want it to make it to be a success, whether you're from the home team or whether you're from Australia.
And, you know, I always love those sort of insights, though, as well, those moments of them being such humans. We see them, you know, out there doing these jobs and they're so stoic, and it's this really isolating role, I would imagine. And it's, you know, even hearing that they get nervous before a big job like the rest of us.
And sometimes you know, you don't know, you know, how they'll feel. And I remember, again, going back to that Australia tour in 2011, we landed in Canberra, and the first day was going to be a day of rest because of the distance travelled. 9 o'clock on the morning, Prince Philip says, "Right, what are we doing today?" And you just think, crikey, you know, I was in my 40s and I was absolutely shattered. And here's a man sort of, you know, in his late 80s, 90s, and he's raring to go. So you think, golly, you know.
Well, I get it. Aussies are a lot of fun. He's ready to hit the ground running, and we all understand that. I'm a little biased, but I think we all agree. So, in a great boost for the King and Queen ahead of this tour, a new poll has shown that Aussies don't want to become a republic under King Charles. As I say, obviously a boost for them and something great to read a few days out from this, but how closely do they watch these sorts of surveys?
Of course they do, because they want to gauge the people's mood. And what you don't want to do is enter a country where people don't want you there. So it will be an enormous boost. As I said, you know, the King gets briefed on what is going on from his media team, from his private secretary, and it just, you know, you need all the armoury in your palace to be able to go out and do what you need to do. So yeah, huge boost.
So moving on now, we recently saw William and Catherine undertake their first joint royal appearance since Kate finished her chemotherapy treatment. Kensington Palace has clearly had a dramatic shift in their approach to PR this year. We saw that with the slick videos, and they're very detailed videos from Kate throughout the year. What do you make of this new strategy?
I think it's fantastic, to be honest. I don't know how much it's come from the couple themselves or from the PR team or from the private secretary. But, you know, for a couple who are quite private on their downtime and protect certainly the privacy of their children, it sort of, that envelope is slightly open now to what goes on behind the scenes. And, you know, the last video was absolutely charming. You're seeing the grandchildren with the Middleton parents, you know, all the beach scenes. You know, it lifts the light, lifts the window on the couple in private. So I think it's lovely, and it makes them relatable.
Yeah,
don't
absolutely.
You think?
I think just to speak personally from what I've seen, it does seem to have given them, ironically, because they're sharing a bit more information, it seems to have given them the space they needed during that challenging time, because they were so clear about the fact that they needed that space.
Yeah.
So it seems to have worked in that regard, which is great. Do you think that it's something, is this new strategy something the rest of the royal family should be following?
I think every member of the royal family will have their own strategy. They'll have their own style. You know, they're individuals. They've got their own interests. They've got their own patronages. They've got their own charities, and they will fulfil their roles as they see fit. And, you know, I work very, very closely with the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh. I couldn't speak more highly of those two. I mean, they're absolutely brilliant. And they're sort of the way that they undertake engagements It's very relaxed. It's quite informal. So every member of the royal family has their own style of doing stuff. And obviously it's more different when you're the head of state to when you are a working member of the royal family, because constitutionally, head of state has to fulfill different areas.
Of course, yes. Now, Ailsa, could not possibly do this show without bringing up my favourite thing about you. You actually made royal history yourself back in 2013. You put up the announcement of Prince George's birth outside Buckingham Palace. I love these photos. What was it like in the palace that day?
Oh, my goodness, it was amazing, Bronte. I remember getting the call saying that she'd gone into hospital. So I thought, first thing is, OK, amazing. This is going to be a nice quiet day in the office then. Nothing's going to go on here. Might as well get my hair and nails done. Not. And just going in and just waiting for the call to say it had happened. It was, and the baby had been born, and then getting the notice, which is obviously the formal notification of a royal birth. So weight of baby, time of birth, and then signed by all the medical team who were actually there at the time, and then walking across the gravel of the forecourt at Buckingham Palace and thinking, please don't drop this, please don't drop this, and chaining it to the railings and hearing that whoosh of applause for fantastic news. And then coming back to the office and then going home, and my little boy had clearly watched it on telly, and he said, Mummy, I saw you on TV. What's for supper? So from being a superstar for 2 seconds to being brought back down to earth.
History. You were a part of history, but children are the great equalisers. It's very humbling. I have a son. I know exactly what you mean. So now we're going to move on to our last segment, which is I'm going to fire some questions at you, just some quick ones.
Catch me out.
Nothing to be scared of. Don't worry. No, you're too good at your job. I wouldn't even try now. OK, to begin with, speaking of Prince George, we learnt this week that his secret hobby is cooking. Who else has a hobby in the royal family that might surprise us?
Oh, I don't know whether it would surprise you, but of course, Duke of Edinburgh, the late Duke of Edinburgh, Prince Philip, and the King, King Charles, both brilliant watercolourists, brilliant painters. And I know King Charles has exhibited his paintings, but both amazing, amazing.
Was that their hobby in their downtime?
Yeah, very much so, to switch off.
It's very civilised. With the next big royal tour about to start, what's your favourite memory from the ones you've been on?
Oh, my golly. So many memories. I was really, really fortunate enough to be on the Queen and Prince Philip's tour of Ireland. So historic tour. That was amazing, just in terms of legacy. Australia, how could I not say Australia, which was absolutely... It was just brilliant because of the crowds. America, I did the Queen's last trip to America. And I've got a friend who actually came over from the States to the UK and stayed with me in the summer. So friendships that you build on these tours, which is remarkable. It's just an honour. Honestly, going on those overseas tours, it's never more than a privilege and an honour. And how fortunate am I?
Yeah, I'd like to get the memoir one day as well, please. So who was the most fun royal?
They're all fun in different ways. Duchess of Edinburgh, always lovely and fun and amusing. All of them. Prince Edward, the late Queen, all different. Going on tours with other members of the royal family are always a joy in different ways. Going on with the Princess Royal. I mean, golly, someone who knows her brief, who's an absolute workaholic. Most of these members of the royal family are older than me, but they put me in the shade. Obviously, I'm trying to get a gin and tonic and want to put my feet up, and they're, ploughing on to the next engagement.
I love to hear that as well, that they're having fun behind closed doors. Yeah. So if you had to go back to your old job for one of the current working royals, who would it be and why?
Oh, Bronte, that's going to put me in so much trouble. Can I plead the fifth on that one, please?
Very diplomatic. All right, but only if you answer this last one. Weirdest royal rumour you ever got approached for comment about?
So, I was staying at Windsor Castle in a room, and it'd been early on, I think it was 2001, and I got a call from Nicholas Witchell, who was the BBC's royal correspondent at the time. And he said, it was about 9 o'clock at night, he said, Ailsa, I've got it on very good authority that the Queen Mother has died. And I thought, oh, golly, not on my watch. So I've got it on very, very good authority. I said, thank you, Nick. I obviously need to get back to you. I thought, oh. So I rang the Queen Mother's private secretary, who was in Scotland, and said, Alistair, Nick Witchell, the BBC's royal correspondent, has told me that Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, has died. He said, Ailsa, hold on a second. Ma'am, apparently you're dead. Oh, how amusing.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, that's a great way of verifying it. No, definitely still alive. You would have seen some things in your time, Ailsa. And thank you so much for coming on and sharing some of these stories. It's been a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure coming on. Thank you so much.
That's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. If you've enjoyed the show, let us know in the comments and subscribe to the channel so you never miss an episode.